Hello, Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we're going to be discussing the Toronto Raptors game against the Sacramento Kings, but before we do that, we've got to look at probably the most pressing issue facing the Toronto Raptors today: injuries. That's correct. During the game against Sacramento, the Toronto Raptors lost two more players to injury, both of them rookies. Jonathan Mogbo had to leave the game with a right hip pointer, and Jakob Poeltl re-injured the shoulder that kept him out of preseason as well as the beginning of the season, so not a good sign. The Toronto Raptors are already one of the most injured teams in the entire league. So Spotrac has a very interesting ranking system for the importance of the injuries that a team has, because if you simply count by the number of players that have been missed over a certain time frame, you can get an unrealistic view of how badly injuries have hurt the team in question. Because if your 15th man has a toe injury and can't play, that's a lot less important than a franchise player with a knee injury. It's not the same. It's not apples to apples. And so what they do to make up for that is that they use the cash, the amount that a player is being paid, in order to determine how much a team is missing. And in that stat, the Toronto Raptors are only behind the Philadelphia 76ers when it comes to cash missing due to injuries. They're number 2. And in terms of actual players injured, they're missing 6. And in terms of games missed due to injury, they're all the way up at 34. So the Raptors are like a traveling infirmary ward with almost all of their players on the injury reserve list. So many veterans, star players, big names, small names, rookies, veterans. So many players on the Toronto Raptors are injured right now. Bruce Brown, Jakob Poeltl, Jonathan Mogbo, Kelly Olynyk, Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley, just to name a few. It is a really dire situation. And they're still scrapping. They are really still trying to win games, and they're putting in an effort. And the Raptors, even against the Sacramento Kings, where they lost the game by 15 points, they were actually leading for a good percentage of the game. They were winning in the first quarter, in parts of the second quarter, in parts of the third quarter, and then it was very even in the fourth, and the Sacramento Kings simply pulled away at the end. They out-talented the Raptors down the stretch, and it's really unfortunate to watch this, but at the same time, let me put a silver lining on this dark cloud. Let's say that you were to have a historically unlucky season where a number of role players and star players were going to be injured at the same time. You would probably want to pick that year to be the year that the Toronto Raptors are not going to be competing. So for example, the number 1 team on the Spotrac's list, the Philadelphia 76ers, who were missing Paul George up until very recently and are still missing Joel Embiid, their trajectory as a team was supposed to be as a championship contender. And they have had injury setbacks that have stopped them from looking very good at all. In fact, they have a worse record than the Toronto Raptors. So which would you rather have? The Toronto Raptors situation where a bunch of players are injured, they're losing a lot of games, but at the same time, they didn't really have championship aspirations and are maybe looking further down the road, perhaps trying to get a high draft pick in this year's draft. This is kind of the ideal time to weather that storm. It's also another time that you can start taking a look at the role players. You can start giving players bigger roles and seeing if they're able to adjust to that. I know that it's had a positive impact on players like Gradey Dick and Ochai Agbaji, and even Davion Mitchell. Those guys have seemed to take a step forward and have shown something for the Toronto Raptors, that they're able to play these big minutes and have impacts. So don't despair too much about the Toronto Raptors injury situation, because if you take a look at it from a big picture perspective, perhaps this isn't the absolute worst. I'm not saying it's positive, okay? I'm not saying that this is great news. Hooray, Scottie Barnes is injured and Immanuel Quickley hasn't played. Yippity-doo. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that it's less bad than it could be otherwise. I think that a lot of the games that the Toronto Raptors played in this season, if they had a player of the caliber of Scottie Barnes or a player of the caliber of Immanuel Quickley, I don't think that they would be 2-7. This may not be the worst thing when it comes to seeding, when it comes to the draft. If the Toronto Raptors start off pretty miserably like they have this season with a very difficult schedule and all of the injuries, and they start to make up the wins later on in the season, it's not going to completely torpedo their chances of getting a high pick. So there's kind of a glass half full perspective to see things here. And now that we've gotten that out of the way, why don't we talk about the game? And the Toronto Raptors had a couple of problems in this game. The first of which I think was the cooling off and the foul trouble of Gradey Dick. Gradey Dick has been on a tear. He has been one of the best Raptors. He has taken a big step forward in his sophomore season and really picked up the scoring slack for the Toronto Raptors. And last night, he had a down game. A lot of it due to foul trouble. He wasn't able to get into a rhythm. And also, he was simply missing shots and also not playing very good D. So just a poor game from him. But in general, I feel like the team struggles when Gradey Dick and RJ Barrett aren't having great games. And the reason for that is because simply the Raptors don't have a ton of firepower. They require those two players to carry the offensive load with shot making and scoring. And so I think the offensive system is looking good. I think it's creating good chances for the Raptors. I think that the movement off of the ball and the passing has been looking better and better and better over the course of the season. The turnovers are down. I know that the Toronto Raptors have turned the ball over a lot at the beginning of the season, but now that they have gotten used to how the system works, they have turned the ball over a lot less. They only had 11 turnovers last night, and I think that they're making the right decisions, but simply they don't have the talent that is necessary in order to overcome teams, especially when it gets down to the nitty-gritty at the end of games when you have to get a bucket. And what was on full display last night was that the Sacramento Kings have a very good isolation scoring option in DeMar DeRozan, where you can give him the ball. You don't have to run a ton of plays. You don't have to put in too much effort. If your players are getting a little tired, DeMar DeRozan can get the ball in that elbow spot and then create an opportunity either at the foul line or from his very accurate long two-point repertoire. So the Raptors kind of struggle to score when their top two offensive players don't have their best game. It is a struggle for the Toronto Raptors to get over the finish line if they are not making their shots, if they're not drawing extra defensive attention so that the role players can go off. It's a tough situation that the Raptors find themselves in. They're hustling, they're making the right play. I don't mind the way that they're playing. The talent disparity right now is simply too much for them to overcome, especially against teams like the Kings and the Nuggets in their building. Those are really tough games to win, and they haven't been able to do it this season, unfortunately. And so let's get into the player evaluations. We can start with the probably the best performance of the evening, and the guy that I was the most impressed with during this game. It was a revenge game, so we shouldn't be that surprised, but Davion Mitchell had a very good game. And he did it on both sides. He is a defensive player first, and he was very good this game. And while he had a couple of possessions where he wasn't completely dialed in, he's definitely one of the most disruptive defenders on the team. He makes it difficult for teams to get into their sets. I know that the Denver Nuggets had an issue with the ball pressure. The Kings had an issue with the ball pressure early on. Getting teams to get into their plays a little later in the shot clock, that's a good thing. And I think that for the Toronto Raptors ball pressure system, where they like to get up into guys and create chaos on the defensive end, he is definitely the main beneficiary because that's the way that he likes to play. He's very engaged on the defensive side of the ball. So that is something that you're going to get from him night in and night out, is effort on the defensive end. And on the offensive end, that's kind of where he struggled for the majority of his career and also in a couple of the games this season. But last night he was actually very impressive from an offensive standpoint. 20 points on 11 shots. He was 2 of 3 from 3, 6 assists, 3 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 turnover. So kind of an excellent performance from him. And he did it playing his role, which was running simple screen and rolls with Jakob Poeltl, and that's where he gets the majority of his assists from, is that simple pick and roll with Jakob Poeltl. And then when he needs to score, sometimes he will get out in transition and lay the ball up, or it'll be a broken play and he'll be able to drive in and score. Or when usually RJ Barrett gets into the paint and creates, Davion Mitchell will be left open on the perimeter. And he did a good job making those shots on kickouts. So impressive game from him. And you can start to see where he is valuable, maybe in the long term. I like the pairing in the backcourt of RJ Barrett and Davion Mitchell, because RJ Barrett has issues on the defensive side of the ball. Davion Mitchell is a defender. And then Davion Mitchell on the offensive side of the ball is not a creator, and RJ is. So it's kind of a harmonious relationship when the two of them are playing. Perhaps when Immanuel quickly comes back, we can see some bench lineups where RJ Barrett plays with the bench and has Davion Mitchell as the guy he plays next to in the backcourt. We can see more of this pairing because I've kind of enjoyed what I've seen, the symmetry between the two of them. Next up, let's talk RJ Barrett, because I think he had a pretty good game, but there are caveats. He was one of the only players on the Toronto Raptors that could generate a bucket, and he did it primarily through driving to the rim, and he is the beneficiary of Jakob Poeltl screens. I've discussed this many times, we won't go too far into that, but he uses Poeltl screens very well. He used Mogbo screen very well last night. He gets into the paint, and then the big is able to screen for him almost a second time, screening the shot blocker off of him, and he can come in and lay it in. So he's very adept at wiggling his way to the rim, and he did it very well last night. He also had 2 steals, which that's good. I think that the steals are not representative of what I'm seeing from RJ on the defensive end. I think he has a lot of work to do on that end. Of course, you could talk about the struggles that he had guarding DeMar DeRozan toward the end of the game in the fourth quarter, where DeRozan was simply getting the ball at the elbow and then sizing him up, taking his time, and then shooting a jump shot. And while RJ didn't bite on pump fakes, stayed down and contested the shot with his hands in the air, I don't feel like he did a good enough job denying the ball and perhaps hassling DeMar while he was getting ready to receive the ball. Because if you can get him further out on the perimeter and then he has to face up a little bit rather than being able to get into his post play, that mid post where he can turn around and shoot a jump shot or fake you into fouling him, that's where you can contain him a little bit better, and he didn't do a good job of that. And second of all, his off-ball defense is still not very impressive. He kind of wanders around on the defensive end, and he loses track of players. He wants to provide help, which is admirable, and I think that that's where he does get some steals, is by wandering off ball and trying to ball hawk a little bit, ball watch. But at the same time, against an offense like the Sacramento Kings, where they are looking to make the extra pass, if you are out of position, you're going to get burned. And he got burned a number of times last night. I remember he tried to help out on a drive with Sabonis, and it was just an easy pass to DeMar DeRozan in the corner, who shot an uncontested corner 3. So he needs to be better on that end. But he's still carrying the offensive load for the Raptors, so you can't be too upset with what he's doing out there. I just need to see more on the defensive end from him. Ochai Agbaji had a good game. He had 12 points, 4 of 9 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3. We'll talk a little bit about that because shot location is kind of flummoxing me a little bit, although he did shut me up last night because I was complaining about his 3-point shooting. He had 2 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, and played pretty good defense. I think that he does a good job of making players work to get to their spots, making players work to shoot over him. He's physical, and he's not going to get bumped off of screens. He'll go through screens, go around screens. He's decent at staying attached to guys in that situation. He had one difficult possession last night where he cut off the initial drive. Fox did his thing where he backed out to the 3-point line, and then Agbaji tried to come out and guard him out there, and Fox just blew past him, kind of caught him a little on the back foot. He wasn't able to backpedal quick enough. But other than that, when you watch him, he's not making any egregious errors on the defensive end, and he's doing a good job staying attached to his man. He's probably the best perimeter defender on the team. And let's talk about the threes. This was what I was talking about last night, was his shooting above the break. And I think that's something that he's trying to add to his game. He took almost all of his threes last night from above the break. And in the first half of the game, he missed all of the shots that he took, and they didn't look very close. And I went online on Twitter and I said, okay, stick to the corners, buddy. But then in the second half, he made 2 of his above the break 3-point shots, which is good to see. But at the same time, I feel like his strongest shot is certainly still the corner 3. So while I'm not completely against him trying to expand his game I don't think it should be a complete departure. And it's not like he was being prevented from being in the corner, because on a couple of the shots that he did take, the corner was open, and it wasn't like it was he needed to be above the break in order to get open. The passing lane, the ability to find him in the corner would probably have been there if he were to choose to stay there. So I'm not exactly sure why he's taking those like only above the break threes. I think that's pretty much most of the shots that he took last night were from above the break. So kind of mysterious why that happened. But other than that, I think he had a good game. One of the lone bright spots for the Raptors. Last night, Poeltl, I don't think that Poeltl had a very good game. He was not as effective against Domantas Sabonis. Sabonis had a number of possessions where he kind of made Yak look silly. None more so than the pump fakes from the three-point line, where Jakob Poeltl came out really high trying to contest a three-point shot from Sabonis, and Sabonis just easily blew past him and got a layup. And that happened twice, one time from the corner, one time right at the top of the arc. You don't need to do that, just let him shoot the three-point shot. You don't have to run him off the line. Put your hand up, do a cornet contest where you just jump in the air, try and psych him out a little bit. And then on the offensive glass, Domantas Sabonis had 4 offensive rebounds, so not great there. He was very effective scoring inside, 17 points. He didn't miss a shot. I think that Poeltl played him much better last game, and defensively, he didn't do a great job on Sabonis. Sabonis obviously also had 13 assists, but that's not necessarily a Yak problem. That's just a Sabonis being good problem. And then on offense, nothing to write home about. He had a couple of nice assists, but he also had 3 turnovers, so not a fantastic game on the offensive side. He missed a couple of gimmies. He has a floor on how bad he can be, because he's always going to be pretty good on defense and he's going to get rebounds, and they really don't have anybody that can replicate what he does on the roster. So it's hard to give him a failing grade in this game, but I just wasn't as impressed as I have over the past week or so. He's been excellent in the other games. In this game, he was just kind of whatever. And last off, we'll save the worst for last, because Gradey Dick did not have a good game last night. He had trouble covering players, especially with Huerter back. Huerter is a talented offensive player, and while he's struggling with the shooting, he can still run off of screens. And he did a really tricky move where he got Gradey going under a screen, and instead of coming out the other side, he went backwards and drove to the rim, and it was an easy layup. And then when he's being isolated against DeMar DeRozan or De'Aaron Fox, or if there's a switch situation and he has to guard one of the talented offensive players on the Kings, he was kind of getting picked apart on that end. No amazing plays from him on the defensive side of the ball, 0 steals, and also picking up fouls. So he ended with 4 fouls, but in the first half, he picked up 3 early fouls and then sat on the bench for a long time. He only played 24 minutes last night, which is a far cry from the multiple plus 30-minute games that he's played over the past 5 games or so. And I don't know if that's the correct call. I understand trying to protect your players and allow them to play in the second half, but I feel like he didn't get into a rhythm this game. He missed a lot of shots. He was only 3 for 10 from the field. He was 0 for 5 from 3. And perhaps that had something to do with sitting for long periods of time on the bench. But he also sat for long periods of time on the bench because he was not effective. He was missing his shots and he wasn't playing very good defense. So a rough night from the sophomore. It can't all be, coming up roses for him. Sophomores are not that consistent. They're more consistent than rookies most of the time, but still sophomores are very hot and cold. You're not going to be able to get a consistent performance from them night to night. It's unfortunate because Gradey Dick has been one of the main reasons to turn into Raptors games, and he's been very exciting. And when he has a kind of stinker like this one, it kind of casts a pall over the rest of the game. It's not as exciting when he's not popping off. On the bench, Chris Boucher had a very good game, 17 points in 25 minutes, 7 for 11 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3. He loves playing the Kings. So if it comes to that, if they need to trade Chris Boucher, they might be the door to knock on, because he has really lit them up this season. Shooting 3 for 6 from 3 was very nice. Of course, that's how you want him to start the game, but he was also dunking it and had a bunch of nice layups. He was all over the place on the offensive end, and he still makes mistakes on defense, so he's not a great defensive player, but he's not a complete disaster, and he gives a scoring punch off of the bench, so he had a good game. Hard to fault him when his shot is falling like that, and he was one of the main reasons that, just like last game, the Raptors were able to punch back off of the bench. he still gives them that ability. He's that scorer off the bench that almost every team needs. Jamison Battle played extended minutes last night, mainly due to Gradey Dick's foul trouble. He played 16 minutes, and I don't think he had a great game. He was 2 for 7 from the field, 6 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers. He's trying on defense, although he's not very good on defense. He was 2 for 5 from 3, which is okay. I don't think it was a completely negative performance, and it was certainly a lot better in the second half. But in the first half, it was kind of a nightmare from him. He didn't do a very good job on defense and just didn't make his shots. He looked tentative shooting the ball. He looked like he was afraid to miss. He looks like a player that would be a lot better in a smaller role, and if he wasn't asked to do more than he's capable of. And he would be a lot better if another player were drawing a double team and were kicking it out to him so he could shoot open shots. And that's where he would shine as a role player. But if you give him a bigger role, that's when his effectiveness starts to tail off. Next up, Jonathan Mogbo, who was playing great. I really, really was loving what I was watching from Jonathan Mogbo this game before the injury. And if the hip pointer is serious and he has to miss a couple of games, that's a big blow to the Toronto Raptors, because he has been filling the backup center role so admirably for the Raptors off of the bench. And one of the reasons that they are able to be effective off of the bench is his hustle plays, like offensive rebounds, steals, pass the ball when he gets into the paint on a short roll, attack the rim. He is an exciting player to watch, and he had a very good sequence at the end of the first half when he stole the ball. Alex Len secured a defensive rebound. Jonathan Mogbo stole the ball, passed it back to RJ. RJ missed the layup, but then Mogbo was right there, grabbed the offensive rebound, got a putback. That's kind of what he does. He is a bundle of energy. He's very strong and quick. 5 points, 5 rebounds, 4 of them offensive. That's a huge number right there. That is, offensive rebounds are obviously much more difficult to get than defensive rebounds, and it just goes to show how much of a hustle player he is. 2 assists, a steal, and a turnover. Raptors are really going to miss him. If that hip pointer sidelines him for any games at all, they're going to lack an effective contributor off of the bench. Jamal Shead had an okay game. He didn't have quite as good a game as the game previous. 5 points, 2 of 5 from the field, made a free throw, missed a 3. 2 assists, 1 block, and 1 turnover. He knows what to do on offense, and I think he's doing a pretty good job running the offense. He is a guy who is good at using screens and getting into the lane and makes the right play most of the time. However, he is not scoring as well as he was at the beginning of the season. It seems like a bit of a struggle for him to be able to create scoring opportunities. And one of the reasons for that is that his off-the-dribble three-point shot isn't very good, and he doesn't really have an in-between game. Mostly what he's doing is being an opportunistic scorer, which is fine because he does do a good job of handling the ball and getting other players involved. On defense, he is a pest, and he is making it difficult for teams to get into their sets, picking up guys full court, but at the same time, maybe he ball hawks a little too much. There's a double-edged sword situation going on there, similar to how a lot of the other defenders on the Raptors are. They're maybe trying to help a little too much. Maybe they have to stay at home a little bit more than they are right now, because a team that can pass the ball like the Sacramento Kings are going to find open players, and they're going to make their shots if you give them enough opportunities. Last up, Jakob Poeltl, the plus-minus king. He again led the Raptors with a +8, and part of that was because he got injured before the wheels came off of the Raptors bandwagon in the fourth quarter. He ran into a Domantas Sabonis screen with his right shoulder, which obviously was the shoulder that he hurt in training camp. So that's not good. It's really a shame. Missing those games, missing that development time. I'm sure he'll be okay, but you would like to see that learning curve from a player where they get better from game to game, figure things out, so they don't have to learn it later. Get well soon, Jakobi. Hopefully it's not as serious as it was when he injured it the first time. And that's the game. I said it after the game. This is probably the second worst game of the season. And part of that is because one of the guys that you wanted to watch and got excited to watch and has made the games a lot more fun to watch in Gradey Dick did not have a good performance, probably his worst performance of the season. They were winning for a good percentage of the game, but it seemed like they did not have the juice like they did versus Denver, like they did against the Kings the first time they played them, even against the Lakers when they made that big comeback. They did not seem to have that energy and that panache and that liveliness. So it's kind of hard to watch a basketball team when it's just clearly not their night. Hopefully they're able to bounce back in their next game. Next up, the Toronto Raptors will be playing the LA Clippers in LA this coming Saturday, and the rumors of the LA Clippers' demise have been greatly exaggerated. They've been playing pretty well this season, with James Harden still being very effective, Ivica Zubac's taking a step with a bigger role, Norm Powell, the one that got away, he is also balling out there, so I don't expect that to be an easy game. Now, there are a couple of players on the Raptors who are traveling with the team. Manuel Quickley, Kelly Olynyk. Who knows? Maybe one of those guys will make their comeback. The Toronto Raptors have a pretty decently long layover between games. Maybe guys can get right and recuperate, and guys who we think are going to be on the injury list could come off of it. Who knows? That will be a difficult game, and following that, they'll be staying in LA and playing the LA Lakers. But next on the docket is the Clippers, and I'll be excited to watch and cover that game. But yeah, that's the video. So what do you think about the Toronto Raptors injury situation? Is it a blessing in disguise? Has a witch put a hex on them? And also, what did you think about the game last night? Do you think Gradey Dick is going to have a bounce back performance against the Clippers? Let me know here in the comments and also on Twitter, where you can reach me at Raps Report. And as always, thank you for watching Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.